Welcome back to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio, podcast, and television show. I'm your host, Life Coach Marina Young, and sitting in the guest chair today is Kasia Urbaniak. Kasia is the author of Unbound, A Woman's Guide to Power, and today we are going to be talking about how to escape the bad girl label. So ladies, if you want to be the good girl, if you want to be the good wife, if you want to be a pleaser, you've got to understand that there might be some pushback against that. And Kasia is going to talk to us today about how to take back our power. So welcome, Kasia.
Thank you, Myrna. It's a pleasure to be with you, transforming our minds.
Exactly. Yes, I love that. I love that. All right. So let me give you guys a short bio on Kasia. Since founding the Academy in 2013, Kasia has taught over 4,000 women to radically increase their power, agency, and influence using practical tools. Academy graduates transform their lives by breaking the yoke of good girl conditioning. They step boldly into leadership roles within their relationships, families, workplaces, and wider communities. They become adept in the art of verbal self-defense against bulldozing, bullying, and gaslighting. They make bold, life-changing acts of the people around them in a way that feels good to the person being asked. They can hear no without getting flustered or given up, and use resistance as a way to build intimacy and partnership. All right, well, this is original content on this show because I love it. You know what I mean? So Kasia, let's start off by asking you, what was your journey into founding the Academy, teaching women the foundations of power and influence? Now, I read part of your bio that you were once a dominatrix or something, so you can add that in there too.
I found myself with an unusual set of training, thanks to the School of Life, which is that I dreamed of being a nun, and
Wow.
and I explored various spiritual traditions, and wanted to transcend this world. And the one that spoke to me the most, because it seemed the most practical and magical, was Taoism. Now, while I was pursuing my training and pursuing the monastic education, the ironic part was there was no way for me as a girl growing up in New York City to be able to afford such things without getting a job that would pay me a lot of money in short bursts. So I was working as a professional dominatrix in dungeons in New York City in these marathon bursts, and then flying off to meet with teachers and to convince them to teach me, all the way up to mountaintops in China. And this lasted for the greater part of a decade, this straddling, this absolutely, I have to say, split personality education, where I felt guilty about one when I was doing the other. But what started happening was these extremes ended up merging. When I started diagnosing people's bodies as a Taoist trainee, when I started going to deeper states of meditation and attention, I started seeing similarities in my work as a dominatrix when I was paying attention to a human being and starting to understand power dynamics the way you study martial arts. So anyway, this becomes much more apparent when we start talking about what I actually teach, how I teach power to women. Because I do not teach as a dominatrix, and I do not teach as a nun. So after this wild life of extremes, of extreme desiring absolute purity and devotion while going into these wildly psychologically strange and weird and interesting places with other humans, I started noticing that I was changing. I saw all my friends around me and all the people in my life, the women especially, living in a world of assumptions and superstitions. What does this text message mean? Is this a red flag? And especially, when you're 18, 19 years old and you start, or 22 years old and you start entering the workplace, it's difficult to see how much discrimination there is against women. It's when you're 30 or 35 or 40 that it's as a woman gets older that she starts saying, oh, all the men I started out with surpassed me. It's when life starts kicking your butt, when your relationships start failing, that's when you see, it's when you start having that ample energy of a teenager. So I started watching this stuff happen where they started speaking to me with these conditioned assumptions that I was also educated in, but because of what I was doing with most of my time, I had no problem being bold or direct or spiritually compassionate and kind of living outside the bounds of that. Now, this lasted for a very long time. And I met my business partner, who's a man, Ruben Flores, who worked for Doctors Without Borders. So he was in Africa and he was in war zones and he was, building field hospitals. And we had this one pivotal conversation one night about power, where he had to deal with protecting with borders, with people with AK-47s, and try to get these groups of people who are trying to kill each other to agree, we're setting a hospital here, without being able most of the time to speak the same language, foreign languages everywhere. And I was talking about how women don't realize that they physically with their presence broadcast and communicate all the time. Men and women do. Power of the dominant kind, or power of the magnetic, you could say more submissive, but it's not submissive at all, attractive kind. And he, in different languages, was talking about the same thing. And all of a sudden we realized that we were sitting on top of a storehouse of lived experience and information about the wisdom of how to communicate below the level of language, not just what you say, but it's difficult to talk about in our world today, especially in Zoom rooms constantly, but the vibe, the assumptions, the perception, the headspace, transform your mind, right? The blinders we don't even know that we have going on. And through a series of serendipitous events, all of a sudden we have students. I have students coming. There are more links to that story, but I want to get to the stuff where I'm talking to you, to your listeners, about things that might help them, not my fabulous life story. So fast forward another
fabulous, though. It's fabulous. Wow. I've never heard one like it.
we all should be able to say that about our lives, right?
Right. I mean, wow. Listen,
so one of those blinders is good girl conditioning, right? One of those blinders, the assumptions about what is good. Because I believe that you wouldn't have even invited me on this show if you didn't already know that the idea, the conditioning about being a good girl, the problem isn't being morally good. The problem with it is that at the end of the day, it doesn't work. It doesn't work for anyone. The end of the day is it results in lashing out, or it results in the censoring of the light, your best ideas, the things that would. So this isn't an anti-morality conversation. It's correcting our idea of what good is.
Right. Listen, you had a lot of nuggets, and you're very right. When your publicist approached me and she started off with the dominatrix thing, I pushed back right away. And then when I read it a little better, I understood what you were trying to say. Giving women the power to not be, even if they're submissive, but you can still be submissive and powerful, right? And also, I know that being a pleaser and being a good girl doesn't get you anywhere. People walk all over you. We've got a saying in my country that says that if you lay down like a doormat, people are going to walk all over you. So I understand what that is. But then we started the conversation, and I introduced it right away because it was I wanted to hear the story. Now, no part in your bio did I see the nun experience thing, which is why I'm saying that is a fabulous story. You're in New York and you're doing the dominatrix. And by the way, full disclosure, I know all about it. I had a very good friend that was a dominatrix. I've seen a dungeon. I know what it is. I know what it is. All right. So
with the amount of care and attention and precision and healing and what I dare say love can go into those sessions, that it's very, very precise. It's not violent.
Precise. It's also, for what I know, it is power. It's a power play, right? Yeah. So I understand exactly where you're coming from. The people that have hired you to be power over them, they have something that they need to transform in their mind. So this is going to be a splendid, splendid conversation. I love it. All right. So we're going to dive right in and we're going to hit directly, you're right, what we want to talk about here, which is you help women break the yoke of the good girl conditioning. Tell us why specifically the label of a bad girl is beneficial, because I'm interested in hearing your spin on that.
Okay, so first, a moment of honor and compassion for our mothers, grandmothers, for the patriarchy, for tradition, for everything that came before. Because it's especially when we start seeing the ways in which we are compromised, limited, censored, hurt, it becomes very easy to overlook that a lot of good people and a lot of good intentions went into even the subjugation of women. And this is very, very important to remember, because just because we wish to transform something doesn't mean that it didn't make sense to loving people 6 generations ago or 600 years ago. Good girl conditioning has a very long history, and it comes from the agreement that we make as an economic agreement, not a spiritual agreement, not a personal agreement, but an economic agreement of marriage. We have a deal, right? And there's nothing wrong with even holding that deal today. But the deal is, I will let you lead, but you provide for me. Mm-hmm. So up until very recently, a woman who had ambition, a woman who had an opinion, a vision, desires, couldn't express it as an individual. The best she could do, the best way she could fulfill her ambitions was to marry well. Mm-hmm. So the behaviors around the good girl are the behaviors, what we're calling good girl conditioning, are basically the behaviors of how to be marriageable.
Yes.
In that agreement.
How to attract and keep a good man. All right, yes.
I want to say how to attract and keep a good man, how to qualify to marry the most economically promising, right? Given that you can't have a job, given that you can't get educated, you can't read, you're not allowed to leave the house in some, if you look at we're talking about millennia of human history. So what is that? I have to be not a burden. Mm-hmm. I have to be resourceful, because if you're the economic provider, then I have to be able to make big things out of little things, be resourceful, be moderate in temperament, not be too attractive so as to not get competition, but not to be noticeably unattractive, not to stand out in this way or that way, not to have too much sexual desire, not to have too much desire at all, actually. So it's not just being accommodating and harmonious and warm, but also not being hurt, not having a voice, essentially, right? Right. So right. There are some women who are like, I'm not a good girl. I don't need anyone. I'm fine. I'm fine, right? The independent woman is an outgrowth. The modern day independent woman is an outgrowth of the good girl. Why we call her an outgrowth, like a sister of the good girl. She's still the same thing, because even though she believes that she can have her desires, she has to go for what she wants, 100% herself. She never asks anybody. She never burdens anybody. She does it all. She is the feminine and the masculine. She is everything. And a lot of the women who come to my school are like this because they're very successful. They have families, they have careers, they have everything. They are exhausted and they are furious. Underneath it, they're seethingly furious. They have to do it all. It's like, yeah, I'm having it all, but I'm doing it all. I'm doing it all.
The Superwoman syndrome, right? There was a song, but I liked it with the Superwoman, right? Yes.
The problem is that men who hold, first of all, you don't have that same phenomenon with men because men don't do it all the same way. And if they are in positions of leadership or have career, they have support that the women in their same place do not, right? So here we are. And the issue with good girl conditioning is you can say, I'm an independent woman. I push back. I stand up for myself. You can identify with someone who doesn't have good girl conditioning. But the truth is the conditioning comes out so quickly that we barely catch it. Yeah. Agree to do something, offer to do something.
Subconsciously. Yeah, it's we're programmed. It's in our subconscious, right?
Yes. And so when I started off this conversation being like, when the school founded, when Ruben and I were having those conversations in those early days, what we saw is it lives below the level of language. It's in the body. It's in the structure of how we use our attention. So it happens so fast. So fast. You get a compliment. You go, oh no, I'm not that great. You're not going for the job, We are talking about a subconscious physical inhibition that decides for us before we even open our mouths. So breaking that becomes a very interesting proposition, because what we want to do is work outside of those high stakes moments. So when they come along, our instinct, our impulse, our habit is the same way it would be when we were children, because children do not have this issue. Children do not have this issue.
No, they don't have any good girl conditioning. So why do you say specifically that bad girl is it's a good? Yes. How do you transform them from being a good girl to a bad girl? And what does bad girl really mean?
Okay, so we got three things, and bad girl is the first of the three. And the other two are really important elements in the bad girl. So the first is a really simple exercise. And I want to set up the context of this exercise. I have the women that I work with do this exercise, which ends up being more difficult than it sounds. And the intention is to let all the bad girl things out onto paper. Let it in, because what we want to do is start kind of opening Pandora's box in the safest way possible. So we start with a sentence completion. So it's part of a sentence, you fill in the blank and you repeat it. If I were a bad girl, I would, right? And we use bad girl specifically because it brings you back to that younger state where you start learning what it's okay to like, what you're supposed to not like, what you're supposed to think is cool, what you think is correct, all that stuff. Yeah. Whether it's parental or religious or peer to peer, right? So bad. So you go back to that, and right now, if I were bad, and this is an imagination game because you are supposed to be writing things you will never do because they're illegal, because you would destroy things you care about. What's the purpose of writing all these terrible, terrible things? Is that in that unleashing, the things we didn't even know we put in the bad closet start coming out. And when I explain part 2 and 3, it's going to become even more apparent how this works. So you start opening the bad girl closet. So a lot of women doing this exercise, they'll draw a blank or they'll write one really mean thing and kind of freak out about it. Or be like, I don't have a bad girl bone in my body. You know, you keep digging, coaxing softly without self-punishment. And so what they sound like when they start coming out, it's really interesting what comes out.
Well, I can tell you, I'm sure a lot of it is around sex and what bad girls do and what good girls do. Right?
A lot of it, but also some of it is actually incredibly, like, if I were a bad girl, I would get 9 hours of sleep every night. If I were a bad girl, I would take quiet time in the morning to meditate or pray, because what starts coming out is free associations. It's all the things that we're not doing because of some form of inhibition. So yes, I would wear lingerie to work and make my boss kiss my feet. And some of it can be violent, but even the stuff, if you create this middle space, right? What we're looking for is this middle space between subconscious thought and outward action. You're not acting on it, but you're not hiding on it either. You're taking it out for yourself or in the company of another woman that you're doing the same exercise with, but you're unpacking it. And some amazing ideas come up. Some of them sound like I would quit my job and move to my uncle's beach house with my kids and start teaching them on the rowboat. You know, they get wild. And this is the thing, is because we live so much so in this world where we're constantly responding to what is, that the fantasies, imagination, the great ideas, the desires, the sexual liberation, the healthy things, the imbalanced relationships where if you don't stand up to somebody when they first do something, 10 years later, your bad girl protocol is like, I want to cut their head off. Right. And if I were a bad girl, I would cut that person's head off. After that, what starts coming out is, oh, I need to clean that thing up that happened 10 years ago. Right. So all of these point to something inside. So that's number one. The next thing is part of how this works. Part of it has to do with anger and part of it has to do with desire. So I talked about that middle space, the middle space. The middle space is really beautiful for transforming your mind, right? Or checking the fallacy or the veracity of our assumptions. Like, what does it mean to be good? Oh, if I say I don't want to go to this wedding, I'm going to hurt their feelings. You know, living this life of obligation, this thing that ends up, we start being able to see the cost of it and how groundbreaking it is to tell the truth.
That's basically why I said a pleaser from the very beginning, because yes, you're a pleaser, right?
So, the bad girl can point us in directions. You know, the bad girl's first voice sometimes is the answer. It's the thing we need. And sometimes it's just pointing in the direction. So, all right. So anger, especially women in anger. Good girls do not get angry. The bad girl is powerful.
Is that part of the submissive conditioning or what? Why can't good girls get angry?
Being angry makes you absolutely unmarriageable. And unmarriageable, I mean, in the traditions in the ideas of 100 years ago, right? We are terrified of a woman's anger, but we are also terrified of the anger of anybody that's been oppressed, because it's been building up. And when it comes out, right, women have to hold back their anger. And the longer that happens, the scarier it feels. It's like that. So there's in terms of social and political control, it makes sense that socially acting on anger would not be constructive, right? Just pure, there's a reason why we prohibit anger and then regulate it in like military operations. But when it comes to women and anger, this becomes incredibly dangerous. So this is where the middle space comes in. Okay, this is what the anger comes in 3 phases, right? The first phase is like, if you think about your leg that's fallen asleep, right? You know, you don't know your leg's asleep in phase 1. So a lot of women come to me, they don't know they're angry. They're tired. They don't know what direction to go in life. There's an amazing way in which repressed anger and depression, exhaustion look very similar. Very, very similar. A lot of the women I know think that they're just tired, but they're actually really, really, really angry. And that repressed anger is eating away, leeching away the core of their energy. So it's like your leg's asleep, you can't use it, but you don't really know it's asleep. You start shaking it awake. And then there's the pins and needles phase, right? So the women are, I coax them into a state of anger. We'll call this leg being asleep phase 1. Phase 2 is when it's awake, right? It's pins and needles. It's very uncomfortable. This is the stage that people are most afraid of. You're reckless, you're angry. If you talk to somebody in that state, you will bite their head off. You will tell them everything that's wrong. You won't ask them for what you want. You're out to destroy. So in our civilization, in our culture, we go from phase 1 to phase 2, then we go control yourself, and back to phase 1, back to phase 2, back to phase 1. Most people spend more time in phase 1 than phase 2. Some people live in phase 2, but it's a back and forth. The thing is, there is a phase 3, and this is where the middle space and the good girl becomes really, the bad girl protocol becomes really useful, because you can dip your toe into moving towards phase 3. So here's what the phase 3 of anger looks like. Phase 1, I don't even know I'm angry, but something's amiss. I don't feel good. I'm not fully alive. I'm not in my body. I'm depressed. I don't know. I don't have a direction. I don't know what's nagging, right? I start waking up nagging. Then I'm starting to get irritable and pissy. And then all of a sudden something hooks and I'm like, that's wrong. This does not work for me, right? So 2, I'm fully in phase 2. I know what I'm against. I am against this thing that was said or this thing that was done in the world or in my personal relationship. And I know what I'm against. I know what I'm against. And all my firepower is starting to rise up because I believe I've identified the enemy. But here's the real pivot. The enemy of what? If somebody disrespects you, they are not your enemy. They are the enemy of the vision of being respected. This is where we switch from what we're fighting against to what we're fighting for. That's where we get to phase 3. Phase 3 of anger looks like laser precision, power. I know what I stand for. This is what I'm aiming for. Even activists suffer this problem when they're fighting against something and they're not putting enough emphasis on the vision behind it. Let's end this problem so that we have what? It's an energetic and very, very clear to identify thing, because the anger goes from phase 2 when it's chaotic, dangerous, it's reckless, it's all over the place. It starts funneling into an unmessable with laser of passion and precision. And that's when you are so directed. All that energy that in phase 1 was draining you, and in phase 2 was endangering the lives of you and everyone you love. In phase 3, it's different to fight against sexual predators than it is to fight for a world that's safe for young girls.
All right, well, let's put this into context where somebody that's listening, because as you're talking, my mind is spinning, and I'm thinking that a lot of times we get upset and angry when someone is not showing us respect. It's a big word. Men like it, women want it. So I can understand you're saying, and you're sleeping, and you don't really understand that your man is let's break it down. Your man is disrespecting you when maybe he doesn't call, maybe, he treats you like a maid or whatever. And then one day you wake up and thinking, this is disrespect. So now you're teaching them, hey, you know what? I want respect. So how do I get it? How do I, because that's one of the things that we're going to talk about here. How are you bold enough to ask for what you want and not be angry about the fact that your man is disrespecting you, but be bold enough to say, well, listen, I'm going to take back my power. You're going to respect me. You're going to treat me a certain way, and you're going to do it. And you're doing it in such a way that they're saying, oh my God, she's unmarriageable. She's disrespectful, whatever. You're teaching them to say it in a way that doesn't have any pushback. You use some words that I didn't understand where, you're talked about in your bio. You talked about bulldozing and self-defense and bullying and gaslighting. So let's go there for a minute. How do you teach them to, in phase 3, get what they want and address all those other things?
Excellent question. Excellent question. So I'm going to break it down in a couple phases. The first is getting from stage 2. I don't want this, right? I want this to stop. To phase 3, I want this. I want this to start.
Right.
If you pinpoint one moment where say your man's disrespecting you, you wake up to it, right? The good girl is starting to the good girl conditioning is starting to let loose enough for you to see that you've been disrespected. You're in phase 2. I want this particular moment where he did this or he said this, I feel disrespected. How do you get from I don't want this to I do want that?
Mm-hmm.
Because first has to do with specificity. If I say to my father, for example, I want you to respect me, it sounds like I'm in phase 3. It feels like I'm in phase 2. I want you to respect me. I'm still complaining about what is going on and not actually proposing a concrete vision of what I want to happen. So if you have one complaint and you can come up with 10 desires that make that one complaint impossible, I'll give you an example. I feel disrespected by my father. One incident was I revealed something really, really intimate and really important via text, and he didn't write me back for 6 days. I don't know. We're making stuff up, right?
Right.
So the question becomes specifically, if I was the dominatrix of the universe and I could control my father's behavior, what 10 things would he have to? What 10 things would he be doing that would say to me he respects me? So, I mean, I'm not saying you go and ask for them. This is right. So like, if the question is feeling seen and heard or attention, you're like, hey, Dad, would you be willing to leave me a voice message every Monday wishing me a good week? Or, hey, Dad, can we have lunch once a month where for the first 20 minutes, I just complain. And at the end of the complaint, after the timer goes off, you say, you're daddy's little girl and you'll figure it all out. I believe in you. Or I'm talking really, really specific. If it's a relationship, can I yell at you for 15 minutes and you just sit there and take it? And afterwards, we just pretend it never happened. Or the thing is that what reads as respect for one person is not going to read as respect for another. And of course, across genders, it changes. But even for women saying, I want to be noticed by my boss, for one, it means a cash raise. For one, it means a new title. For one, it means the ability to pursue different projects. For one, it means being able to regulate your own schedule. That's respect. So we are always training people. The fact that we do it badly is just conditioning. So there's no reason why any woman should be feeling crappy about herself for training her men poorly or training her people poorly. It's just the magic is when we start getting really specific, we start moving from phase 2 to phase 3, we start getting really specific, making really specific baby step requests, the entire ecosystem of our social, professional, and family life begins to change. Because even with a small one, when a human being gets a chance to do something that's manageable in their scale, you can make huge, outrageous requests, by all means do, but the smaller ones should not be overlooked in value, because the other person has a chance to start feeling in small, regular doses the ability to make us truly happy, light up, instead of 99% happy where we don't light up. If I ask,
typically, how does a woman tell her husband that she wants respect? And actually, that was the question I asked you. How would somebody give us a concrete example of you wake up and you don't feel respected and you want to tell your husband that you want respect? How do you do it?
You never, ever say, I want you to respect me, ever. It's so vague. And all it does is say, you don't respect me. That's the communication. There's something wrong with you. You don't love me. It's trashing on everything underneath that actually works. So you do not say that, first of all. But what I want to point out is what happens when you go from a complaint to a desire.
All right, but we're limited on time, so let's
Trust me.
talk it down for a little bit and answer, what do they do? So somebody would get some context. All right.
The moment you are voicing a complaint, you are creating an atmosphere of defense.
Okay, so that's good.
No.
Well, I mean, it's a good response. So we don't want to be in defense. We obviously want to be in offense, right? So how does someone do it? How do we state our desires in offensive mode?
Marina, listen. The moment you ask them to do something specific, the moment you ask them to do something specific that you want, right? The power dynamic has changed. So the issue with women is that their energy is too inward. Their energy is too inward. I'm hurting. I'm complaining. I don't like this. This is a problem. Look what you're doing to me. I am the victim. I have no power. You have to fix it. It's all your fault, right? You don't respect me. You don't respect me. You are disrespectful. You don't respect me. The moment you say, hey, this is how respect shows up in my personal world. You can, will, would you do X, Y, Z, and 15 other things. That's when your energy is not directed on how you're inferior, suffering, or hurt. It's moving outward to what they are to do. So once you put your attention that way, you are in the dominant position. You are in the dominant position. So if I put you on the spot and I start saying, Myrna, why did you wear a blue shirt? And you start going, I don't know. You're in the defensive position. I don't know. I like blue. Isn't this a nice shirt? But if you turn your attention out towards me and go, why are you asking me that? You're in control. You're in the powerful position. You're no longer a good girl. You're putting your attention on me. I am now the puppy and you're now the alpha dog, right? So even though it doesn't look like offensive or bitchy or grating, the moment you start directing their actions, making those requests that really would resonate as respect to you, you are in the dominant position. And the moment you start going, I need this, you're making them in control of your happiness and telling them they're doing a bad job at the same time. You are always training people, always training people. And when you put your attention on what they are to do and start making those requests and learning how to have them follow up on the requests, verify the results. You agreed to this. What happened for you that you didn't do it? Or that felt amazing to me. Did you see me light up? You are training people. And some people need a lot more training than others. But for ourselves, our voices don't get stuck in our throats if we move from the defensive position of explaining and justifying, it's really important to me. I need this. I don't feel good about this. And we start going, no, you you need to call me every Monday, Dad. Like, it would mean a lot. You are the kind of man who knows how to have good relationships or could have really powerful relationships with his daughters. For me, this is how it would work. So what do you say to that? And then the whole art of asking, the whole art of knowing how to deal with a no. I mean, we would need legitimately 8 hours for that but keeping your attention out on them is one of the most powerful confidence formulas you could possibly imagine. Because if you're really paying attention to what's happening and speaking to them about them, you don't have any room for self-consciousness. You don't have any room for defense.
Okay, I got you. So you also say that, because I've heard this a lot, that men say, oh, she's too high maintenance. But you're also saying there's no such thing as a low maintenance woman, just women that are not bold enough for ask for what they want. So touch on that quickly before we talk about your book.
So because women through good girl conditioning have been taught to keep their desires a secret, even from themselves. No, I'm fine. I don't need that. No, I'm fine. I don't need that. We don't have big, bold, unreasonable. The goals and desires we have to fit into a masculine society. Like, I want to, start my own business or whatever. So high maintenance, low maintenance. No woman is low. No woman is low maintenance. But when men complain about women being high maintenance, what they're actually saying is not they're too much work. What they're saying is, I never got the instruction manual. I heard things like, you don't respect me, but I didn't hear things like, roses better than tulips. I heard you're emotionally unavailable, but I have no idea what that means. I just got used to ignoring and tolerating the complaints of women because I never really got what it was that would make them happy. They weren't asking for the things that would actually light them up, give them orgasms, make them feel supported, held, empowered. What I got was a bunch of vague things. And what sounds vague to a woman when she's saying it, I even have students who've been with me for a little bit and they say they don't even know it's vague. Mm-hmm. Specific. Yeah. So you find a man who's getting specific instructions for the first time. He's like a little boy in a candy store. Like, yes, what can I do next? Yes, what I can do next. Oh, he feels competent. Like the way some, men take care of their cars. And, they're like all of a sudden really excited, like really specific, like really, really specific.
Yeah.
And then women are shocked. They're shocked at how many men want to make them happy.
Yes, that's actually women, I know that a man that loves his woman thinks all day of things to please her, and all she's got to do is ask. But you're right. The good girl conditioning, they don't want to ask for things because they feel that, they're being, I don't know, too high maintenance or something. All right. So as we come to the end, tell us about your book. It's called Unbound, A Woman's Guide to Power. And what would you like? I know you give us a great scenario of moving from the phase 1, 2, and 3 and understanding the power dynamics and all that. So I'm pretty sure that's part of, main part of your book. But what is it that you want the women to walk away with? We didn't have enough time to talk about, the power dynamic, that you found being a dominatrix and what you learned, being a nun and how it merged in the middle. But, so tell us about your book.
The book is a step-by-step training manual. So it definitely talks about how to ask and how to get off the spot when you're being bullied and bulldozed. And there's a lot of how-to stuff there. Also, there's it's when we learn how to create allies out of all the men in our lives, we are actually learning the same thing with women, right? So the book is also a journey through how to get all of the support that you need from the people in your life to make your actual dreams and desires come true, not the ones that you think are attainable and not the ones that you think are socially acceptable. So it gives us time to walk through the book as a series of exercises, gives us time to start going, what do I really, what would really light me up? Mm-hmm. And there's obviously a huge part of it is breaking the good girl conditioning that has us sometimes not even know what that is.
Right. Okay. So that's awesome. That sounds like a really, like it's different. It's very different. So, so give me a snapshot of the type of woman that, this would help. Are you gearing it to a woman that's been oppressed or all women in general?
All women, but mainly anyone who feels like they're a little bit off their purpose and they're a little bit frustrated with their feelings and feel like maybe they've settled, they were asking themselves like, maybe there's more to this. We say that the academy is a school of aliveness, that instead of going into what is good or bad, what success or failure might look like. We go into what is alive or dead, because there are things that look good on paper but are dead when you think about them. So it's for anyone who feels like they want to be following what's alive in their own lives more. They're off the pulse. So it's a way to correct back and be like, oh yeah, I don't need self-discipline for this because I feel so passionate about this and I don't need to make myself do anything. I can't stop.
Perfect. Right. Yeah, that's perfect. I know I had to zoom it in a little bit. All right, but I almost forgot to ask you about your academy. So how can those listening and watching on TV, connect with you, get a copy of your book, get information about your academy? So talk about it. What is the name of the academy? You just call it the academy here.
Call it the academy.
That's what you call it?
The academy, the one and only. So the easiest way to find out more is to go to the website weteachpower.com, and we have an announcement of all our classes, but also a ton of free resources and videos and things that the interested listener, viewer, reader can engage with. And the book is available everywhere books are sold. It's, Penguin Random House published it. And there's my TED Talk that I delivered to 10,000 people live on there. There's links for everything.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, yes. You're a good speaker. This was a great interview. I know, we needed, much more time to delve into all the topics that are here. But thank you for being so in-depth about understanding, the mindset of women and the mindset of the power. You didn't touch on it, but you talked about the aura and what we portray, whether it's sexuality, whether it's, lack of confidence or whatever, but everything, who you are shows up in your communication, whether it's with your spouse, your boss, your children, or whatever. You touched on that briefly. So, this was a perfect interview on the mindset of, taking back your power, the mindset of how to ask. It's similar to an interview I did once with, Laura Boyle, and she talked about the empowered wife, and she talked about the same thing. You don't go and tell your husband certain things. There's a way to ask to make sure that he still feels that he's powerful. Now, it's a different spin to yours because you're still kind of manipulating. So you're teaching women how to authentically take back their power. And I like what you said. You don't never go and say, you're not respecting me, because that puts him in a defensive, and it doesn't mean that you're going to get respect. You've got to find a way of getting that respect without, verbally asking for it, I'm assuming. So your book is, book would be a great guide. I'm pretty sure you delve into, those little nuances, a lot more. But so I definitely want to thank you for coming on the show and being so passionate, because I can tap into your passionate about your work. My regular audience know that there'll be a transcript of my interview with you on the show page, which is blog.myhelps.us, and I will link out to your TED Talk. I will link out to your website and also to your book. What is your social media handles?
Real Kasia Urbaniak on Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah, I think everything is on the website.
It's on the website. Okay. All right. Just make sure. All right. Well, listen, we're definitely fresh out of time. So definitely want to thank you. Any last words before we wrap up?
No, this was wonderful. Thank you so much, Myrna.
You're very welcome. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio podcast and television show. Now, if you're listening to this on iTunes, would love for you to rate and review so that we can get these fantastic guests out to wider audience. So thanks for tuning in, and until next time, blessings.